Okay, you're streaming and recording.
Thanks. Hey, Vic.
Are we ready, Ann?
Hey, Ann, how you
Yes,
doing?
we are.
All right. Our chairman and CO members, Willie, Beverly, Jeff, and others. Welcome everyone to today's open meeting on the Commission on Oversight. My name is Wanda Ward, Chair of the committee, and I'm accompanied by the committee's Vice Chair, Scott Stanley. Ann, will you take the role?
Yes. Please say here when I call your name. Aaron Dominguez, Yolanda Gill, Jeffrey Isaacson.
Here.
Thank you. Willie May.
Here.
Scott Stanley.
Here.
Kayvon Stassen. Wanda Ward.
Here.
And Beverly Watford.
Here.
Thank you. Do we have any other board members on the call today? I know we do.
Victor McCrary.
Thank you, Vic. All right, Wanda, you may proceed.
Thank you. Our NSBO liaisons are Ann Bushmiller, Portia Flowers, and Alexandra Sochel. Our executive secretary is Laura Slatton. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of our February 19th meeting. The draft minutes are in the committee's board book. I'll give everyone a moment to access and review them.
If people would like, I could put it up on the screen. I think I've got that ready, if anybody wants.
We've received some feedback, I think, from Willie the other day. Does anyone have a correction? Are the minutes accepted as presented? Thank you. The minutes are accepted as presented or amended. Let me provide a status update on a February meeting item. The Office of Inspector General's semi-annual reports present statistical tables on investigation outcomes, including the results of plagiarism and research misconduct investigations, and the number and amount of question and unsupported costs. Also, a 2022 IG report printed trend information on plagiarism. Scott said it would be helpful from an oversight perspective to see misconduct trends over time. Inspector General Wallace responded that OIG staff would review available data to see if certain data sets are sufficiently comparable so that they could be presented over a 2 to 5 year span and provide meaningful information. The OIG has been reviewing data and met with NSBO staff. They hope to provide one or more options at our next meeting. Next, the Inspector General let us know that OIG staff stationed in Antarctica, in effective collaboration with NSF staff, the Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. law enforcement, investigated a case of sexual misconduct resulting in the arrest of a U.S. Antarctic program subcontractor earlier this month. There is a news release with more information about it in your digital committee book. Megan, would you care to say just a few words about this?
Sure. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for letting us speak today and ultimately present our audit plan. I would like to speak to the enforcement activity that happened late last year in South Pole. The level of commitment of the Polar program, as well as other NSF folks, our military partners, Homeland Security investigations, and especially our team, our small team of investigators who are staffing a nearly full-time physical presence down in Antarctica. Had a successful operation, which was to identified and stopped the it wasn't a sexual misconduct. It was actually a child pornography and solicitation of a minor. So we are moving that case forward quickly. We did arrest warrant last week and forwarded the press release to the board to share with them the progress as we are allowed to share on an open matter. As far as where we are going today, we would like to present to you the NSF OIG audit plan for fiscal year 2026. And with that, if I may, Wanda, pass it over to Teresa Hull, our Assistant Inspector General for Audits.
If you'll give me just one moment, I'll present an overview and an outline, but thank you for that important update on the child pornography and solicitation of a minor situation. But looking further at today's meeting, we'll first receive the presentation from OIG on their audit plan for 2026 with an opportunity for questions and answers. Next, the CO will review some of the policy recommendations contained in the merit review report as a basis for considering the committee's oversight agenda and the board's promotion of next-gen NSF capabilities. This will lead to our last item, the introduction of a possible new report that, when fully realized, will help the board and NSF track the efficacy and impact of NSF's portfolio of projects. Please remember to stick to these topics as noticed in our agenda during the meeting today. So we will go to our first item, which is the OIG audit plan for 2026. We'll receive that presentation, and then there will be, as I said, time for questions afterwards. So now I turn it over to Acting Inspector General Megan Wallace and Teresa Hull, Assistant Inspector General for Audits, Inspections, and Evaluations. Megan may choose to introduce.
Thank you, Wanda. I'm so sorry I jumped the gun. Teresa, I'll pass the baton right to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that everybody can see my screen okay. All right, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to brief our oversight plan this morning. Before I get started, I wanted to explain that this year we decided to approach our plan with a different mindset, understanding the changes that NSF experienced this past year, as well as the changes from our office, from staffing and other changes we experienced. We realized that in order to be agile, responsive, and to cover the most important issues, that it would be more impactful for us to identify risk areas, and then within those specific risk areas, note some projects that we plan to issue this year and start, and also some areas that we're monitoring that may turn into oversight projects during the fiscal year. So as I walk through, I'll make sure to point out the ones that we are planning to do and areas that we're monitoring. Before I talk about the risk areas, I thought it would be important to explain how we determine what projects to take on. And in order to do that, we consider a lot of different factors as depicted in these circles on the image on the screen. We aim to provide the most relevant and value-added oversight. These factors all come together in that decision-making process. For example, throughout the year, we conduct outreach with NSF management to talk about challenges they're experiencing, progress in other areas. We talk to our congressional committees of jurisdiction, which often which may result in different congressional requests for work. We also send out an official letter to the board and to NSF leadership to request specific ideas or suggestions that we consider when we're developing our plan. And we also look at data from our Office of Investigations. The Office of Investigations provides referrals to us that come in through the hotline that may not be in the lane of investigations, but might be more beneficial for an audit. So we look at that as well. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the management challenges document that guides a lot of our work. Prior oversight work is also a great indicator of potential projects for the future, because sometimes we'll identify an issue in an audit that requires a deeper dive, and that'll initiate a project in a related area. So these are the 4 areas that we identified this year as our oversight focuses. The statutorily mandated, our top left quadrant here, are our annual or multi-year cycle projects. They're often compliance-based, but they're geared towards ensuring that NSF follows the rules and regulations. Regarding moving over to the NSF award recipients, this focuses on managing and spending of federal funds in accordance with grant terms and conditions, looking at program outcomes to see if they're in line or being achieved. And while this body of work is not statutorily required for our office, we do consider it a top priority because it helps us safeguard federal resources, and it helps us work towards establishing the proper controls in the recipient community. And this is often where we identify our monetary findings in the form of question costs. The USAP is within that body of work where we aim to strengthen program accountability and the safety of participants. And just last year, we stood up a contract performance audit team that is going to look at the different contractual aspects for lessons learned and best practice opportunities to carry forward. The bottom quadrant of emerging areas, that is where I would say we're going to be the most agile and most responsive. This work is going to focus on some of the newer programs and priority areas that NSF takes on, and we'll be looking at it from a risk-based perspective. I want to talk a little bit more about the specific projects within each of those 4 areas, starting with the statutorily mandated projects. The first 2 listed there are probably the most familiar. Every year we will do a financial statement audit, we will do a FSMA audit. Some of the other required work that I'll list a few. In the single audits arena, we're required by uniform guidance to evaluate the reliability of single audits. So you'll see that work coming out of our office this year. We also are required to periodically assess the agency's purchase card program. And that is something that every OIG office is required to do. Our last assessment of the program was in 2025, and we will look at that again. Another required audit that you may be familiar with is the Sunshine Act. So that is something that we look at on a triennial assessment cycle. The oversight of NSF award recipients. So for fiscal year 26, we have completed or are in the process of completing 5 cost audits of NSF award recipients. These audits focus on the recipient's capabilities to manage NSF awards in accordance with terms and conditions, but also we look at the subawards as well, if that's part of the award. We later in this fiscal year, we do anticipate being able to start more of those specific cost audits to be able to allow us to get to a more meaningful percentage of the NSF award portfolio. In addition to those cost-based audits, I wanted to mention that we're also in the process of completing a programmatic oversight project of an NSF award recipient, specifically NCAR, that we are working on the report and hope to issue it in the next few months. For USAP, the risk areas that we have on this slide are really a collection of information that we've achieved and taken in over the last 2 years or so, including concerns that were identified during our team's site visit to the ICE. I had mentioned earlier that we stood up a contract performance audit group of about 4 auditors, and they are monitoring kind of what is going on with the current contract, keeping an eye on the transition to a new contract. And when the time is right, we'll be initiating work in the contractual areas. For our USAP, we have an ongoing project, an audit on fleet and facilities that we hope to release by the end of the fiscal year as well. So in emerging areas, as NSF invests in emerging key technologies, we will also pursue oversight into those areas. We're specifically looking at the management of the investments, again, stewardship of federal dollars, robust internal controls, making sure the control environment is set up, and to ensure the overall outcomes. A couple of projects that I wanted to focus on, or areas I should say that we're looking at and monitoring, relate to the AI Research Institutes program and also the Engines program. The next two slides are not part of our oversight plan, but I wanted the opportunity to update you on the progress, or NSF's progress, towards addressing our open recommendations. And the FY25 percentage I know looks low there, but that's because the corrective action plans have not yet met their dates. When I say corrective action plan, it's really the details of the timeframes and the how and the when NSF is going to put changes in place to address recommendations. And I wanted to update you that of those 48 open recommendations, majority are either resolved or in progress. So from our standpoint, not necessarily an area of concern. NSF does do a good job of implementing recommendations in a timely manner. The recommendations that we issued this past year focused in three major areas. It was discovery of question costs, improvement of policies and procedures, and implementation of new internal controls. And my last slide, I just wanted to, again, give an update on question costs. You'll see on the left-hand side there of the slide, those are the question costs that we presented. And then to the right, it's the sustention, which is what NSF goes after to the recipient and requests the refund for. So a lot of the question costs came from unallowable expenses, insufficient documentation or proof, inappropriate allocation of various rates. But the majority of those cost recommendations come from indirect costs, travel, and salary expenses. So NSF does have policies and procedures in place for its recipients, of course, through the terms and conditions of the awards. But it's still something that we continue to look at because of again, the direct connection to the stewardship of federal funds. So that completes my presentation this morning. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Teresa, Victor McCrary, great presentation. Quick question, 2CRF 200 is undergoing changes right now. What changes do you see will impact in terms of the awarding institutions that we deal with here at NSF?
Thanks for that question. We recently were involved in a data call where we provided some comments for consideration. And I think it's too early to assess how those changes will impact. Plus, there's a little bit of a delay between when an audit starts and the policy starts and then the audit starts. So I think this time next year, we'll be able to give you a better perspective, but it is something that we consistently monitor to make sure that we are looking at the most up-to-date policies and, again, making sure that stakeholder or the federal funds are safeguarded.
So I guess what you're telling me, I can tell my folks in the institutions awarding, things are coming, but don't worry about it, at least for this fiscal year and possibly for the next. Well,
from the audit perspective, I would say yes, but for the recipient, of course, the implementation date of the change is something to focus on, just to make sure that whatever spending results from that is in line with the change.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised. Teresa, you referenced, I think it was on slide 7, the status of AI. I believe in our last meeting, Megan reported out that an AI working group was being assembled or is being assembled or something. Did she or you mention that? Could you share the status of that with us?
We have an internal AI working group for OIG. We recognize that this is a really important moment for our office to leverage technology in a safe way to be able to more effectively conduct oversight. So it's something that we're exploring. And I'm sure at a future time, if it's of interest to the board, we could come back and give an update. But right now, we're trying to determine left-right limits on what we can do and how we're going to do it.
Absolutely. This is something we'd be particularly interested in briefings in your subsequent presentations and discussions. I see that Jeff has his hand raised.
Thank you. Teresa, nice presentation. Could you say a few more words about the process that the office uses to decide which discretionary audits to undertake in a given year?
Absolutely. A lot of factors go into it. Right now, the biggest issue is staffing. So I look across the portfolio and the staffing levels and determine timing, like when will an audit end, when will an audit start, what staff is available. But then we also have a consistent, what I call a 1 to N list. So as NSF is investing in various portfolios, or as we learn about particular issues, I'm consistently racking and stacking what is that priority area, because we have to be so careful and purposeful with how limited our staff is, which projects we take on. So, for example, if engines is something that we've been researching and we see that the awards have gone out and they're at a level of maturity that would be beneficial for an audit, that may supersede a different area. If we issue an audit, let's say on the United States Antarctic program, and there are findings on the fleet, and we find that there's something there that needs to happen, and then there's an event that happens that could potentially supersede the engines. It's a very dynamic process, which is why this year we switched to a more agile presentation versus in years past, where we would issue essentially a document that just listed projects that often became overcome by more important priorities.
If I can follow up, what role do outside offices have in determining those discretionary investigations or audits?
As a point of clarification, is the outside offices? Could you clarify what you mean?
Outside of the Office of Inspector General.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
as an independent arm of NSF, I'm wondering how are the interactions with the rest of the agency and others outside the agency?
We conduct outreach all year long with the various offices within NSF. So if a leader comes forward with a particular challenge, they may suggest or ask for us to look at an area or a program. And we consider it based on what our own monitoring and research of particular issues are. And if it's something that we think raises to the top, we consider executing that. But we can't always say yes, but we do for the most, what we conclude is the most value added.
Thank you.
If I might take a moment, also stemming from our last meeting, we very much appreciate, as Jeff said, the excellent presentation on the audit plan. We'd like to revisit briefly with you your last presentation on FSMA, and I'll turn it over to our Vice Chair, Scott Stanley.
Thank you, Wanda. We had a couple of questions. The FSMA audit this year wasn't as positive as it has been in the past, and we understand there were a number of factors associated with that. One question we had was, how did NSF compare to other agencies regarding compliance and the results of that audit?
Well, it's tough to compare because each agency is so unique from a mission perspective. But I will offer that this past year, due to what we covered last time in the law of averages, if you will, every year you're being measured against a certain number of objectives for FSMA. And it just so happened that last year, because of where NSF was in its progress and implementation of prior year findings, the law of average almost worked against the agency. So I I know that there has been additional weaknesses identified, like as of last year, but our next contract or our next contractor will be looking at those. And NSF is well aware of what those challenges and weaknesses are, and could be working on them to help improve the rating for the next FSMA audit.
You had mentioned the AI working group. Is the focus of that using AI for your internal use as an efficiency tool, or is it addressing AI as a threat? Since we're talking about FSMA.
Megan,
I'll answer. So for us, there are two working groups. I think, Wanda, what I alluded to was the working group that is writ large, the SIGI community, for oversight, to apply oversight of AI and the use of AI. So we are doing an internal working group to figure out how to leverage it internally safely, do more with less. But the SIGI community is actually looking at ways in which to implement governance and oversight of AI. So they are still a nascent working group, although it's been amazing to hear from the tech committee when they give an update, how many people are kind of doing it on their own and bringing a lot of education to the table. So they're getting up fast and furious. I would say in terms of agencies, Postal Service, OIG, is probably the most advanced. They've probably been on the scene for at least 3 years, and they're providing a lot of, I say go-bys, but a lot of lessons learned for the rest of us for implementation. So I did want to make that distinction.
I appreciate that. That's extremely important for us to know the government-wide undertakings on this extremely important issue. I thank you all for an excellent presentation, as always, and full discussion and engagement with our committee. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you again for the trends analysis that you all are striving hard, and we look to hear next time the status of that.
Definitely. I would like to say, Wanda and Scott, we'd love to have a pre-meet with you to make sure we're going to hit on all cylinders on that. There's a lot of ways that can go. So we'll reach out. We'll work through Anne to make that happen before the next meeting.
Look forward to that. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. And
Bye-bye.
now we'll turn to the committee's role in overseeing the implementation of priority items from the merit review report. After thoughtful review in late 2025, the board issued a report revising NSF's merit review policy and offering guidance to NSF and the board on merit review processes to increase transparency, accountability, and clarity. Future NSF merit review is an integral part of Next Generation NSF, whose portfolio of awards delivers on all facets of its mission. Key components of Next Generation NSF include understanding and communicating NSF's unique value to the U.S. S&E ecosystem, the need for NSF to be more agile and to move faster, and being impactful, which means demonstrating the benefits delivered through its awards. Policy recommendations and guidance from the report will be instrumental in achieving the benefits of Next Generation NSF. Steps the committee will take include receiving information on NSF's initial steps towards assessing how and to what degree each proposal addresses the requirements of each review criterion. We understand NSF is taking steps to act on this recommendation, and we'll have more information soon. Next, discussing strategic opportunities to reduce administrative burden while improving the usefulness of data that we continue to collect. This is a shared priority for NSB and NSF. NSB provides the ability to look at strategic alternatives for agency consideration. Understanding gaps and needs in NSF's current data infrastructure for longitudinal award tracking. Pursuant to our strategic plan, NSB will communicate NSF's unique value, agility, and impact on the national S&E enterprise to important constituencies. For this messaging to be effective, NSF needs a systematized method to track awards and their outcomes. Also, engaging with NSF on how the board's goals on portfolio management could be realized through the Science Strategy Council and other means. Now that many advisory committees are not meeting, NSB seeks to collaborate with NSF at an appropriate level to ensure leadership is aware of the frontiers in all areas that it funds. Also, engaging with NSF on updates to PAPG. We will make sure that the board's policy recommendations are also incorporated into an updated version of PAPG. Importantly, we will also monitor the agency's continued efforts to empower domestic STEM talent in achieving national leadership in STEM. This is consistent with one of our report's recommendations to expand participation. Do members have comments on or addition to these CO oversight responsibilities? As we schedule committee meetings and prepare agendas, are there topics you would schedule before others? Did I see your hand, Vic? Okay. Questions, comments? We went through a lot there.
Hey, Wanda, just one comment I would say is to think about among CO. We've had the committee structure and CO for about a decade now. As we talk about next gen NSF, how do we talk about next gen NSB and next gen in terms of committee and our oversight function? And that's not to say I'm talking about diluting it or changing it, but I am saying is let's think about how we operate, okay, differently, and just have that among the committee, something to think about, and we can, discuss that at the board meeting, giving a lot of changes in terms of not only administration priorities, but how agencies are running and how we look at, particularly with the new director coming in, and that even going forward, so put aside administrations, people are going to look at federal investment very differently than how, particularly in research and development, very differently, and workforce development than when we put this structure in place in 2016. So I guess basically in a few words, how do we stay fresh?
Very good, and thank you for putting that on the table with us now, Vic. And if you don't mind, this is something that we'll want to give some express thought at our April meeting. Do we meet monthly? I can't. Anyway, at our next
I am
meeting.
trying to have us meet monthly, and I will put it on the agenda.
All
And
right.
Bev Lee has her hand raised.
Yes, Bev?
So and I want to say it was one of the first bullets that you mentioned was the one about, what do I want to call it? Public understanding of NSF, but public awareness of NSF and what we do and how we do it. And that seems to be my shtick these days. So I'm wondering, is there something that we can do to maybe, number one, I don't know what's happening internally at NSF on that topic. So that's one thing. I know I'm sure we have a public relations group of some sort. So it'd be nice to hear, okay, so what is done to promote NSF internally? And then maybe based on some recommendations from them, are there other agencies that do it better? that promote themselves better, and how do they do that? And maybe invite, a panel of people from other agencies or something to tell us about what they do. NASA comes to mind for one. I mean, their public relations people are the bomb, but there are others. Well, are there others? So I'll shut up. I talk too much. Sorry.
Not at all. This continues to be a critical, you remember the board established that external engagement committee, and this ties into Vic's question about the structure of the foundation and, in this instance, committee structure of the board. Do others have thoughts, very briefly, about that? We still have one agenda item to go, but we have certainly noted that, Bev, and this is something that Willie speaks to us about frequently, meet the public where it is, etc. And so that's duly noted, and thank you for keeping it on the agenda. Other questions that people might have? We're doing okay on time. Thank you all. Still a robust discussion, but we're moving in a timely fashion. If not, our last topic flows readily from the discussion we just had. We will consider a potential new NSB report, which the CO will initiate. We are currently calling it the State of NSF. This report would parallel to, but be distinct from, the science and engineering indicators. Roughly speaking, the goal is to create a one-stop shop for indications on how well NSF is working, which would be oversight, and how well it's meeting its mission. On the oversight component, how well is NSF working? The report would replace the Merit Review Digest. It would demonstrate process-oriented indicators and former digest data, and would include those associated with MRX recommendations. When fully realized, this report could include operational performance data, OIG work, business systems data, and, if they return, committee of visitors work. The board has talked for years about the need for NSF to prove it is having an impact through the use of taxpayer funds. The State of NSF would be a vehicle to build out what the foundation and board need by pulling data that are already collected and determining what essential is missing. Ultimately, the State of NSF will provide easier portfolio visibility, particularly around cross-cutting things such as critical and emerging tech and talent development. The vision includes paralleling the indicators to allow us to contextualize NSF's contributions in the national and international context, setting the stage for strategic discussions around discovery, innovation, and talent, which are the three major areas of the indicators currently. Here's an example of a question the State of NSF report might be able to address. SEI, the indicators shows needs for STEM talent in some areas. Is NSF investment moving the needle? If so, by how much? If not, do we have the data needed to impact strategic changes by the foundation? Please note that this is a desired end-state capability for the report, not an immediate deliverable. It'll take time for us to identify the most useful data for the agency and for our stakeholders across the federal government and sectors, and then to obtain the data where possible for analysis. So I'll turn to Alexandra Sochal, the staff lead on this project, for a brief introduction of our project conceptualization to date. Alexandra?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Wanda, for the opportunity to expand on your comments on the state of NSF. As the board builds the next generation NSF, the foundation is already building, as you all know, the next generation of grant management systems. In light of these activities and the recommendations from the board's merit review report that Wanda just outlined earlier in this meeting, there's now an opportunity to rethink what data is collected, analyzed, and presented to measure agency impact. This opportunity should be undertaken to ultimately increase agency efficiency while decreasing workload, a top priority of the administration, NSF, and the board. Transparent impact metrics, as you all know, are a strategic imperative. Agencies that have a clear command of their research portfolio and impact are best positioned to meet their mission, contribute to the overall national S&E ecosystem, and demonstrate agency value to Americans. As Wanda already mentioned, the sky is the limit in terms of what the state of NSF report can become, a one-stop shop, if you will, for foundation metrics of interest to leadership, both internally and externally. To fulfill that potential, we propose a short-term pilot comprised of 4 main phases. The first phase is what's happening today. All of you will help refine the concept and goals of this report. The second phase is identifying data needs. What are some of the indicators that would best demonstrate how well NSF is working and how well the foundation is delivering on its mission of knowledge production, talent production, national defense, economic prosperity? This phase is an opportunity for the board to determine some of the key indicators that would help internally, for example, with portfolio management, and externally on engagement with the administration on the Hill and with other stakeholders. In addition to the talent question that Wanda already raised, some example starting points in this phase generated from previous board discussions and requests are: how well is NSF identifying the next frontier of discovery and innovation? What is the economic return on investment of NSF-supported research? What percentage of the nation's GDP results from initial NSF investment? Wanda and Scott aim for a full board discussion at the May meeting. In the third phase, the Committee on Oversight will solicit input from board members, staff, and importantly, your colleagues at the National Center of Science and Engineering Statistics, or NCSES, to identify viable and high impact data that would be used to answer phase 2 questions and thus desired for a pilot launch. The board will contract to assess available public and administrative data, and CO will outline a framework for the pilot of the State of NSF report. In the fourth and final phase of the pilot, the collection and analysis of the data will begin. A draft pilot report with a sample of available data will be presented to CO. We anticipate that this pilot will not just identify available data, but also holes in the data collection that exist, but whose demonstrated value to measure NSF impact is high. Both the available and desired but missing data will be highlighted in the pilot report. The data bins, as Wanda mentioned, are expected to be aligned with the SEI indicator bins of discovery, innovation, and talent. That concludes my remarks on the work plan, and for discussion, I turn it back to Wanda.
Thank you very, very much for that overview, Alexandra, of goals and intent. Let me open it up for committee response and thoughts about the issues that Alexandra has shared with us. As she pointed out, very much still in the stage of conceptualizing and planning. So there's, ample time. I see that Jeff has a comment or a question.
I'll give you both. Comment is excuse me, I really like the idea. The question on data, I'm wondering if we've considered collecting inputs from external stakeholders of the National Science Foundation, with an emphasis on the word external. Maybe the answer is no thus far. Let's consider
Alexandra,
that,
I think
please.
perhaps the question is being posed to you.
What do you mean by external stakeholders, Jeff? What did you have in mind?
Well, NSF gives grants and runs programs that are run by the scientific community at large. I would think that we would want to solicit inputs from the community that the National Science Foundation is serving at the national level.
Yeah, so just wanted to make sure we are in alignment on what you meant by external stakeholders. Absolutely, that is a possibility. At the moment, for the pilot part of this project, we're going to be looking at administrative data and the data that is collected through annual reports, final reports, things like that. So there is input from external stakeholders that can obviously be expanded as the report expands.
Okay, well, we can maybe bring that up, Wanda, when we meet in May.
Yes.
But I would just put a marker down that I think it's really important if the idea is to quote understand how well NSF is working and meeting its mission. The input of those stakeholders I think is very important to consider.
Absolutely.
Oh.
I see
There are
Willie and
also-
Beverly's hands. Go ahead, Alexandra.
I was just going to say there are also proposer and reviewer surveys that NSF conducts that we could probably pull from as well.
I see, and I believe the order will be Willie and Beverly, but before we move on, I would like for us to consider the initial focus that you mentioned, Alexandra. Since the primary intent of this is transparency, delivery, and I know that this is the early stage of that. I'm wondering if focusing initially on administrative burden is the best route for us in terms of possible early turn demonstration of the value of the report. And we can discuss this in our regular meetings going forward. But let's please do revisit what the initial focus might be, as long as it's doable to undertake. I'll turn to Willie and to Beverly. We've got about 11 minutes to go.
Okay, I guess I've repeated this several times, but I'll do it again. I think in report like this would be remiss if we did not somehow get input from the stakeholders. So we're talking about how effective NSF is. We really need to get input, not just from inside the Beltway, but we really need to find a way to get input from people out in Middle America.
We agree with that, and that aligns exactly with what Jeff just raised, the stakeholders.
Exactly.
So that's something that we know we'll need to focus on early to the extent practicable. Beverly?
And I don't know if this is even practical or makes sense, but I was trying to think about, because Jeff's comment about stakeholders raises a lot of questions for me in terms of who are the stakeholders. And I wonder, is there a way to understand what NSF's impact has been on the goals and objectives and activities of other agencies?
Would you restate that? That's very important. Would you please restate that?
How can we measure or find out about NSF's impact on the goals and objectives and activities of other agencies? And that could be through partnerships to fund something or oversee something. It could be just an outright award that goes to. It could be the outcomes that they have and how, this is where you get into, okay, our really, really basic research enabled this outcome,
What's so very critical about the point that you're raising there is that one of our main strategies now is multi-sector partnerships. And your question poses, what will be the benefit of that, but how does NSF demonstrate its unique value, as we've prefaced our statement, on the goals and objectives and activities of other agencies? Most recently, we've been talking about, I believe, collaborating with Genesis. That's an excellent question that we need to be considering from the early point of conception. Thank you for that. Victor?
Just adding 2 cents here and some kudos. First of all, I want to give kudos to Willie May. He had put together a session with the Council on Competitiveness and University of Maryland earlier this week and had a number of sessions. And I want to thank him for inviting me and a couple to moderate a session. But what came out of that one session, Gracie Narso, who is the director and head for TIP, made some comments about when you talk about feedback. And one of the comments she was saying is we've got to get outside of the rewards or the incentives right now, the promotion and tenure system, because those rewards and incentives don't necessarily stir the kind of conversation you're talking. So getting to what Jeff is saying, what NSF has received to date is basically in a system that looks for its own self-preservation. So you're only in one bubble. Okay, so you're getting stuff from the customer that you feed, who's going to always say, yes, you're doing a good job, or yes, these are some things, because they depend, you are their lifeline in terms of financials. And then it also goes to what Brian has asked the board for over a year now, is how do we look that we are being broad in our impact, not just in one sector? So it kind of goes also, Wanda, to the original question I said about even the committee thinking about, how we change. I think to Jeff's thing is, how do we get to these other stakeholders, middle America, industry, these other folks, such that the conversation at the dinner table is saying, people know what Social Security does for them. People know in some sense what NASA does for them. Okay. When I was at NIST, people were saying, okay, how do we get that same type of recognition? Because people thought NIST was like a nose spray. Okay. And how do we say, what does Joe and Joanne taxpayer? So I think the same thing here. NSF has done a lot, but how do we make sure that our stakeholders are not seeing just the people that we fund? Because I think you'll get a distorted view of how well you're doing versus a broader set of stakeholders.
My system went completely out, so I lost you just for a moment. But we appreciate the important points all of you all have raised. Geographically, one central consideration that we've talked about previously is not only reaching everyday citizens, but being able to show by state what the impact in a given area is. That not only says something to the citizens of that state, but critically says something to one of our important stakeholders, legislators, so that they have something to sell on our behalf. Willie, you have your hand up, please. This
Okay.
may be the last.
I just wanted to expound on what Vic just said. Back in around the turn of the century, we were beginning to ask ourselves some of those same questions at NIST. And we began a coordinated campaign to tell people who the heck we were and what we did and why they should care. Result of that is that our budget doubled over about a 5-year period of time.
Excellent. Absolutely. It's a winner across the board. And that's something we absolutely have to consider and focus on. Thank you for that, Willie. Any other thoughts, suggestions, or comments? This has been as usual, this has been a rich committee of oversight meeting and engagement. We'll continue, as you can see, with all of the issues that we merit review, state of NSF, even ongoing issues like the Antarctic, etc. we'll be busy over the next few months. And I look forward to continuing these discussions. And it's good to see the serious engagement of IG. We look forward to continuing that. So thank you all for your participation today. This concludes our business for the Committee on Oversight, and the open meeting is adjourned at 10:57 a.m. 3 minutes to spare. Thank you all.
Thank you, Wanda.
Thanks, Wanda.
Great
Have a
job.
great weekend, everybody.
And thanks,
And
Steph.
Enjoy the
that
warm
should
weather.
that should probably